Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. Fire facilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Generation Engine podcast with Fire Engineering. A little different this month because we don't have Todd with us. We've got a guest we've had a few times, very close to both me and Todd, so should be a good conversation. Think we have something good planned for everybody. To start it off, Anthony Rowett, a captain with Mobile Fire Rescue, Mobile, Alabama, 20 years in the fire service, 17 years here. And I'm going to turn it over to our guest because I'm going to let him do most of the talking today. I think he's going to bring some good perspective on some topics we've been talking about on the show, and we just haven't got to yet. And I think his perspective is going to be very good on it. So,
Anthony, thanks for having me. Mickey Farrell, 30 years in the fire service, 24 with the city of New York, currently rank of lieutenant. Did majority of my career in the truck company as a firefighter and an officer, but I know both ends, so that's where we're going to kind of come together and have a good discussion today. So again, Anthony, thanks for having me on.
You know, I appreciate the fact we've always done so much together and the fact you've been on this show a few times now, because I know me and Todd both value your opinions on things a lot and think you bring a good perspective to it and an unfiltered perspective. You don't change your opinions just for what's popular, and you never stray from just your experiences. And I think that's what people really need to hear, is not trends, but people's experiences. So what I wanted to start it off with, we're going to talk about the role of the engine officer today. We've talked about training a lot. We've talked about engine roles and engine duties, but we haven't really gotten into just the role of the officer and focusing in on that since we've started this podcast in all reality. So in my opinion, being an engine officer, I was a fireman in the engine. I haven't been in the truck like you outside of working a detail, a time swap, or overtime. So my experiences are in the engine, and my experiences both being a fireman in the engine and an officer was that for the most part, my experiences, the good officers, they did their job well before we ever got to the fire. Obviously, the decision-making at the fire, making the calls on what we were going to do, that was obviously them. But they were never having to sit there and be involved in the task, coach us along of how to do something. If they were coaching us along during the fire, it was more of an encouragement thing. They were never having to get involved in a task level. They were able to keep their eyes and their mind on the full circle of what was going on because they spent their time beforehand doing the training, making sure when they gave an order, we knew how to perform it, and they stayed out of it. So when we got on scene, they would make their decisions, tell us what they wanted. And for the most part, once we got through the threshold of the door, their main jobs became guidance and encouragement. Letting us know, hey, you're doing a good job. Keep going. Pick up the pace. Slow down. Open the nozzle. Or, hey, we're going to, changing the pace a little bit, or whatever it was that they were guiding us along. But a lot of the times their job just became encouragement. Once they told us what to do, they had done their job in the forefront leading up to that. And I think in today's fire service, we've gotten so, I say young, but I guess inexperienced would be the word, of people having to promote up into that role so quickly that they still get involved in the task a lot. And I think that my experience has been the really great officers I've worked for, they didn't have to. They stayed out of the task because they did the work in the forefront to make sure you could handle all of that on your own. They just had to give the order. You knew how to make all the different stretches. It wasn't just stretching a pre-connect, but if you had those buildings in your run area, if they called for a well hole stretch, you already knew how to do it. A coupling drop, you knew how to do it. It wasn't things they were having to get involved at that task level and coach you along as far as that. They were able to get you in the door and then just guide you and encourage you along as far as how the operation was going. But they had really focused their energy towards preparing you for it and then letting you work.
Yeah, I think what you said is leading up to the fire floor. That's what makes good company officers. That's what makes great firefighters, is understanding where we fit in. And that comes from training and drilling, the firefighter IQ. I think it's important to have that IQ and that understanding that when we're leading up to that moment of the threshold, there really should be very little communication. You should know the play on game day. And when you turn the corner, the building is not really so much the variable. It's the understanding where you fit in becomes the variable. The buildings, we are trained for every type of scenario and every type of building. So when we step off that rig, it's just forward progression motion through the leadership of your officer. However, understanding where you fit in, there's very little communications until we pass that threshold. And even then, there's very little communication if you're that good. Good comes from understanding where you fit in. I think that's where we get lost a lot of times from the fire academy going out to the fire floor and everything in between that. There is a gap there that comes from a series of mistakes we have to make. Good officers come from making mistakes as firefighters. So when they become officers, they kind of have an edge of what to expect in the moment. But then the leadership role, there's mistakes within that as well. So then again, humility will make you a forward progressive officer, and your men will follow if you admit humility. We'll talk about difference between engine and truck, but I think that's the foreground of leadership within the fireground is having that humility and understanding where we fit in.
Yeah, and I think the other part to it, and I experienced this one day, I forget if it was overtime or a time swap, but it was actually in the truck, but it was a guy I had worked with for years, and I just happened to be in the truck with him that night. And it was an extrication call, but it was easy. It was like pop a door. And he had 30 years on the job. And it was like, hey, this is what we need. And I moved on. Like, that's all I'd ever seen from the officers was they did the training up front. When they told you to do something, they moved on. They just expected it done. And you would let them know if you couldn't achieve it. And it was like, hey, I need this done. I moved on. We got back in the truck, and it was like, it was kind of like just a light bulb moment of the fact that what I learned about being an officer wasn't from books and all that. It was just watching really good officers. And it was a 30-year guy saying, man, I appreciate it. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, man, you didn't stand there and tell me what to do. It was just, hey, I need this done. And you moved on and you just expected it done. He said, man, I've got 30 years on the job. I've been in this truck my whole 30 years. And usually I get told, hey, I need this done. Now do it this way. And I think that really separates people too. And like I said, my experience, I was just lucky. I worked for those officers that they never did that. They never told you how to do it. They taught you up front, and then they expected it done. And then if you couldn't do it, they'd step in and address it again through training. But they didn't stand over your shoulder telling you every step of the way how to do things. They didn't micromanage. It was just they put the time in with you. And once you got on that call, when they told you to do something, they just let you do it. They expected it done. And it was always telling us, like, don't ask for permission. Once I tell you, go do something, do it. Let me know if it's done. Let me know if you can't do it. And they stayed out of it, and they let you make your mistakes that you could learn from, but they also gave you that confidence to operate. And then, like, for me, it's just a benefit that I worked for those guys. That's all I ever saw. So when it translated, I'd been promoted for a while. That's all I'd ever experienced. So it was all I was going to do because I hadn't seen or experienced anything different. But to have a 30-year guy tell you, like, that you looked up to, he was a mentor for you early in your career when you worked with him, of like, man, I appreciate you just letting me do it. I mean, like, probably shouldn't have to be said, but it did. But it went a long way for him. It went a long way for me, of someone I looked up to my whole career saying, hey, man, like, you're doing the right thing. And I think that's something that gets lost now sometimes, of that staying in the task mode even once we become an officer. And that's something, in my opinion, we need to get away from.
What you just said, expected it done. And that's precisely it, is that when you can't get it done, that's when I want to have that communication, especially in the truck company. If you can't get to the rear, you have to tell me. If you can't get the roof, you have to tell me, because I'm expecting those steps, those scenarios to play out in real time. That's going to affect how I'm commanding the fire floor. If you can't get there, I have to know, because I have to fill that gap. And that's where position-based firefighting is so important. We've built a culture of permission-based firefighting where we ask for permission, right? So now the OV, you go to the rear, we ask the officer for permission to vent. That's important. But we also have to be able to read conditions. So if you get to the rear and you have a slight impact of wind, then say that. Tell ladder 1 OV to ladder 1, I'm going to hold off these windows until we get water in the fire. Let me know I have a wind condition. That's a forward-thinking OV. That's a forward-thinking outside vent firefighter. That's professional firefighting. And that makes leading and being in that truck officer that much easier when you have the cohesiveness of company integrity. And that comes through communication, not necessarily telling me what you're going to do, but when you can't do it.
Yeah. And, I want to hit on something too. I know we've touched on it before. We've touched on it when we teach classes together. I think the last time you were on this podcast, but I think it's something that should always be talked about, especially when you have people from both the engine and the truck. And it is a reminder, especially, like I said, we are an inexperienced fire service now compared to what it was years and years ago. I mean, we had a lot more really, really senior guys when I came in, and in your era, you're going to have even more than we did because you're, 10 years ahead of me. But that understanding, your role in both, and you being with your experience in the truck, and mine's all been in the engine. You spent the time in the engine as well as an officer. But if you're going past me, above me, in front of me, whatever it is, that you're letting me know before you do it, and I'm letting you know I've got you. And what that truly means, that communication as an officer between the other officers of what that means, that John Norman said at the contract, like that's legitimately what it is. You went above, I'm not leaving you. I think that's something the officers need to make sure they pass on as their people are preparing to promote. And it needs to be promoted strongly when they're firemen, young firemen, of like, this is how it works. He's letting me know he's going above us. We're not leaving. And making sure that doesn't get lost of just people going to work. They're just putting themselves in position. Hey, you're in the truck, your job's the floor above, that you're not just going straight there. You're letting that officer know you're going up there. And we're having that, whether it's a nod of the head, the look in the eyes, and the communication of saying, I got you. And we know where everybody's at. It's one of those things. It worries me that it might get lost as there's less fires happening and people getting promoted earlier. And I think it's one of the most important things we pass on is that communication between the two. And I know you can speak to that, have been in both. But it's one of those things to me that holds a lot of value, needs to be continuously passed on to everybody. It's also not written in a lot of the textbooks. It's passed on from senior men.
Yeah, and it's passed on. However, it is a step that's lost under stress a lot of times because we're so focus driven. We have that tunnel vision under extreme stress. That's when we lose those little details. Again, that's why I feel that there's an art form behind everything we do, and especially in those critical moments leading up to passing the threshold. What you said, the contract, that's what Chief Norman says. I love that. But it's more than a contract. It's an obligation. It's a commitment. It's an intimate moment when we share that, when I look you in the eye and I say, brother, one truck, we're going above. You have to have that seriousness, because it is a very serious move going to the floor above the fire. We have to have that agreement. That's why it's important when companies are together. Like where I work, I have a company in-house. We're also the first new truck for a single engine up the block. It's important that we maintain those relationships. It's important to always look at who is working. Check those riding lists around the surrounding companies, because you want to know when you pull up to the fire who's got the nozzle and who the officer is. Because you already started, you already have the edge now when you get there. That's who you're looking for. You know who you're looking for, right? So if you don't know who that officer is, you don't know that moment when you look up there. Who's the officer? Who's the officer? Could be a covering guy. Who's got the nozzle? Could be a probie. That changes the way maybe we push the limits on the floor above of who those two leaders are on the floor below, on that fire floor. So it's about the details. And I know we say everything's in the details, but that moment is very, very critical. And like you said, we are losing it from lack of experience. But even with experience, I think when you introduce real stress, we lose that step.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that was one of the good things for me of who I worked for as an officer. I worked for one of our most senior members. When he retired as a district chief, he was the most senior member on the job. When he ran multi-company drills and brought companies together to train, he always put environments together of fires he had made and put you under that stress. And we've had fires where those things played out. And the companies were ready for it because they had literally been forced to train on that stressful environment. What are we going to do? These two officers coming together, these two companies coming together, and how they were going to make it work. And one of them ended up being a successful rescue, but it was things that came together through decision making. He forced under stress and made you work together. He didn't just, with me, hey, engine 3, I'm going to put you under this stress and do this drill, and you guys are going to get better. It was engine 3 and engine 8. This is the situation you've got. And he made us work through that decision-making together that we're going to have to do on the fireground. And I've watched it play out. But again, that was his experiences coming through in his leadership of how he prepared his people because of what he'd been through. And I told you I wanted to talk about this. It was something you said on your podcast with Tim Klett, that it was like a light bulb moment for me, that like, man, that's good, because it's something I've prided myself on my whole time as an officer, because it was one of the most like impactful things I saw my officer do when I was a fireman, was that he never raised his voice ever. It didn't matter what we were doing. He was the same person all the time. And it was everything about him. He used to tell me, like, when you promote, you have to understand when I come through these doors, I have to be the same person every single day. It doesn't matter what I have going on. I got to treat you the same. I've got to act the same every day So your expectation follows. Our operations are going to be built off of me. I always have to be the same person. But he did it with his voice too. And when Tim Klett mentioned it, like when he raised his voice, his guys knew. When he retired and I got promoted, he told me, like, you have to do this. And it wasn't just the don't yell at the radio because it calms people. Don't yell because it keeps people calm. He literally told me, hey, I don't raise my voice because it's a tool. Because you never hear me raise my voice. Anytime I do, I instantly have your attention no matter the environment. And he did use it that way. It was a tool for him. We knew anytime he raised his voice, it was one of two things. We did something he didn't like, or the situation changed and it was not going good for us. Either way, we knew just because he raised his voice, even if we didn't know what he said yet, when he raised his voice, we instantly knew our next action needed to be stop and look at him for direction on what to do next. And it was a literal tool for him to use to control his company because he took that self-control to never raise his voice in any environment to us. That yes, he always stayed calm. So when we went to fires, it didn't matter if it was things were going good or bad. We were calm because you had that dude with you. And it was like, man, it just goes right when he's here. But when he raised his voice, we instantly knew, like, stop right now, look to him for what we need to do to make this right. Is it we did something wrong, or is it the environment's changed? Maybe we need to go. Maybe we're doing something. But it instantly caught our attention because it was odd. He didn't have to do he never had to touch us. He never had to do anything different than he was doing other than simply raise his voice because he had the self-control all the time to not do it so that when he did, and that's how he described it to me, he said, it is a tool. I can control my company through my voice when things aren't going good because all I have to do is raise my voice. And you guys know instantly something's up because it was odd. It instantly caught our attention. We instantly looked to him for the next guidance. And I think that's a really important skill again and I think it comes with time because of what you said earlier, stress. Obviously, the newer officer, less experienced, the stress level is going to be higher as you're gaining the experience. But if you can control that voice, that's a big tool you can use to gain control of a situation with your members.
And the way we gain control is accepting the fact we don't have control. And once you can accept that, under extreme discomfort, high stress, you can control anything. And that is, as far as controlling your voice in different temperature or different volume within that moment is so important. But again, that comes with experience. There's a difference between the screamer on the fireground and then the guy who raises his voice as a tool. We have to understand the difference is that when we're screaming, we're trying to temporarily gain that control that we can't. That momentum is going. The fire's getting worse. Stress is increasing. Our heart rate's increasing. You cannot think clearly. Tunnel vision sets in and dominoes begin to fall the wrong way. We can remove ourselves from that and we can focus on our breathing, lower our heart rate, lower our stress. We can now communicate at a very level-headed understanding within the company. That brings the arena of success. And when you said using that tool to say stop, everyone's going to listen, it's important that we understand that is a tool. Because consistency equals professionalism in everything we do. If we're consistent, having that even keel, that the monotone voice, that very warrior type, we're going to war, and we speak very like this on the fireground. I try to do it with my company as well. So when you do say stop, they listen. But if you're runaway sentence, screaming, when you say stop, no one's going to listen. No one's going to take you serious. And it's important we get that. Circling back real quick, I don't want to forget this, is that going to the floor above, is that we have to let that engine company know when you're down off the floor above. If things start to go sideways really, really quickly and people are jumping out asses and elbows out windows, things are going real bad. When you come off that floor above, make sure you make contact with the engine officer and say, brother, one truck, we're down. That way they can back that line out if they have to, or reposition that line. Because I always say that when you're on that engine company, the only place you're going is the burn center, knowing their brothers are above. So when you get down, let them know. Very, very important to have that communication.
Yeah, so I want to go into something too that we've talked about, and I'm going to bounce a little bit throughout today because me and you have had these conversations, and I know there's some certain topics I want to make sure we hit that I think can help people as engine officers, and we've talked about it in the past, and it could help them along. You get in a situation, and I think it becomes routine sometimes with the majority of the American fire services. Typical bread and butter fire is different than yours. They're not all going to walk up buildings and tenements and things like that. Most of the American fire service, our bread and butter is a house fire. And we can start getting away with sometimes getting out of order, if that makes sense, of, hey, we just know we're stretching a line to the front door and we can get the line stretched and then figure out where the fire's at. And that does work in private dwellings because the front door access is everything. But I think it's very important that people understand once you get away from that single family private dwelling, you're not going to get away with getting out of order. We have to remember to stay in order. We've got to locate the fire before we commit the line. I've seen it in houses where it was a 2-family house, but you didn't recognize it. You didn't recognize that side door that's going upstairs. That line gets committed to and only now has access to the first floor. Fires upstairs. You get in some of these bigger buildings that are your bread and butter fire, you're not even going to be part of the game anymore. We can't get out of order in what we do. And I know we've had this conversation of not committing the line until you know where that fire is. For a lot of people, they don't have the ability to have the truck help them in that because just arrival status, they're going to be there for themselves for a while. I know I have that ability to use the truck in a recon mode. I know you definitely do. You're doing that in the truck for engines. But to me, it's really important to not let that become a habit just because you get away with it at single family dwelling fires that are the bread and butter, and you start just stretch the line and we'll figure it out as we go. Because it's going to set you up for failure in bigger buildings. It can set you up for failure in just that single family dwelling that's converted into a multifamily house, even if it's just 2. Like I said, I saw it happen before where they stretched the front door. Front door does not access upstairs. And then the truck ends up upstairs by themselves calling for a line. And it just throws everything out of whack. And once we get behind, it's really hard for us to recover. So before I move to the next thing we've talked about, I want you to talk on that because I know you have a different perspective on that than me. Mine is strictly through that engine of what it's going to do to me. I got out of position. Now I've got to try to recover. For you, most of your career being in the truck, you can speak to a different aspect of that, of what that's going to do to those guys on the truck if you commit the line to the wrong place and you cause that delay in getting water to them.
Well, a great truck comes from an even better engine. So we can't push the limits as a truck company without knowing that engine is going to get into position. Company integrity is very important. Like I said, with the truck, we kind of dance our way into position as firefighters. You can make mistakes, and there's mistakes being made in every moment on the fire ground and on the fire floor. But the truck, those are personal mistakes that not many people even admit to. How many times have we taken a mirror instead of a window as a truck company? You get disoriented for a moment and then you reorientate yourself, but no one ever knows that happened. The engine company, if you stretch short or stretch to the wrong area, firemen die. That's the bottom line. So it is so critical we do not make mistakes in the engine company. I think across the American Fire Service, we're winging it. I think a lot of departments wing it and have gotten very, very lucky over the years. We have to have discipline. Discipline will make you a professional. It's not a matter of a paycheck or what 4 letters are on the back of your coat and what patch you wear. It's about discipline. That makes you great firefighting. That makes you professional. If you have discipline, we have to have the discipline not to charge that line too early, not to stretch the wrong area, just to stand by and wait to say, the fire is here, bring the line this way. Growing up in the volunteers, as well as you, I can't tell you how many times we've stretched a charged hose line into a private dwelling looking for the fire because that's all we knew. Looking back, I can't believe some of the scenarios and situations I've gotten myself into where we got really, really lucky. We were winging it. I think a lot of us wing it. And when you don't do the fire duty or that volume of fire that allows you to make that opportunity to have the discipline, because we want to get a piece of it. We want to be quote unquote aggressive, and we get caught up with that word and that's a whole different story. But aggressive is doing your job. It's understanding where you fit in, the series of mistakes that gets you there. But we have to be disciplined to be aggressive. And that's the challenge, is when we're holding off and we're waiting to hear where to charge that line. That's a really hard thing to do when you want to get a piece of it, right? But understand that position-based firefighting, if you have 2 guys on the rig, if you have 6 guys on the rig, it comes down to understanding where you fit in the X's and O's of firefighting. You have to be able to pivot in the moment on the fire ground to fill in those gaps, to understand fire is in this back bedroom. I only have 2 guys. Let me figure out what gap can be filled to understand where that fire is, to direct the line of position and get water on the fire. Because we all know that water on the fire saves more lives than anything else. We can talk about that old debate of, you pull up and people's trapped. Do we stretch the line or do you go save the people, right? You can debate that all day long. Now, if they're hanging out the window, yeah, maybe you throw the ladder up. But if you have to go look for them, well, I'm going with water. Water always wins, right? And you put water on the fire, we're going to save more lives, but we have to get the engine into position. Going back to what you're saying to your original question, yes, where I come, buildings are very different. We're stretching to the lobby sometimes to figure out what wing. We're stretching to the front door, calling for water and waiting for that truck to come back after that recon and say, all right, brother, down the hall, 2 rooms on the left, it's out the windows. I got control of the door. And here they go. Boom. And they come down the hallway and put the fire out, bringing it back to a more national understanding of maybe private dwellings, ranch type houses. It's the same thing, but like layouts in private dwellings, we should know layouts. This is a funny drill. What I used to do, and I still do it, is go to open houses. If you live in whatever town you live in on Sundays, find out what houses have an open house. Go and take a look at the houses. Look at layouts. That's an opportunity to get into any house you want in the neighborhood. You start seeing the layouts. It makes it a little bit easier to locate the fire, maybe, where you are challenged, you're understaffed. This is another debate where we get into this area of looking for the fire. We're sending the officer to do a 360. I don't agree with this. I think the company officer should be leading your men into battle. Rely on your men to give the reports from around the building. They can direct you into position. Gray area, maybe not even a gray area, but it's a debated area that I've had conversations with. I just think that the first 2 engine officer should be focusing on his company's safety for number 1, a positive water source. We have one, and then getting that line into position, not doing a 360. I feel that's more of a truck company job, a truck officer job. If you don't have a truck, then whoever shows up, not on the engine. A lot of places use the ambulance to come and they act as a fill-in truck guy, right? Send that guy around to do the 360. Whatever your details are within your department, just know that having discipline is so important, because I truly believe we're just winging it, and it's just a matter of time. And it's not that it has happened in the past, but we lose firemen because of lack of discipline and lack of water on the fire. You can't argue that.
Yeah, and I want to bounce, like I said, a little bit, because I know our conversations, and when you were in the engine, you'd send me videos of the guys training in the firehouse and all that, and I would do the same to you. But I think one of the hardest things for new officers to do, especially when you do promote and it's earlier in your career and less experience to fall back on, is just coming up with the training for the members is hard. Coming up with what the realistic drill is, because if you don't make it realistic, they're not into it. They're not having fun. They're not having fun. They're struggling with it. They're not learning. The more they're into it, obviously the more they're going to retain. For me, since I became an officer to now, and I've had a lot of my guys the whole time. I mean, I've had Pettis for the whole 10 years that I've been on Engine 3 as an officer. I've had Rico for 6 or 7 years. So we've been together a while, which that comfort, it does make things better because they know each other well. But my go-to drills have stayed the same. It's stretching hose and flowing water, because I've always looked at it. If we can stretch the line and get in position, we will win. We are an engine. That is our job. What we are assigned to do, and I know we are different than a lot of places, not to the level you guys are, but we do have dedicated engines and trucks doing their job. My job is to get to the fire and get water on the fire and put it out. If we can flow water effectively, flowing and moving when they need to, and we can stretch the line and get there, we are going to win. So for hands-on drills, like, it's never changed for me. It's been stretches and flowing water. And then making things easier was getting out and learning the areas. Estimating stretches to me is one of the best drills you can do. And I know we get away with it a lot, that people don't estimate stretches. The pre-connect works for the bulk of their fires, but we still need to do that every time. That is the craft of engine work. And we've lost it because it just doesn't get passed down. But to me, it became make the runs they don't necessarily want to go to, the toe pain, whatever, the EMS run that's not as fun and glorious as a fire, whatever, and make it about a fire. Not obviously, you go to a medical run, you're treating a patient. Before you leave, hey, ask the newest guy you got, hey, how much hose do we need here? Have the driver, my drivers have always positioned for medical calls as if that building was on fire. How far are we pulling past? Are we giving the truck a spot? All this kind of stuff. So it became muscle memory. It wasn't so much thought process of them. Where am I going to position the rig for this house? They are in the rhythm every time they pull up to an address of where they position the rig. The guys are always talking before we leave. How much hose would we need here? We've stretched hose in building walkthroughs before. Hey, they couldn't figure out, or they got the guess wrong on how much hose we needed. I talked to the building up manager. Hey, you mind if we stretch a hose real quick? We'll be out of your way. Just want to make sure we know exactly what to do and what we need if you guys have a fire. That's realistic for guys and helps them learn it versus just drawing it on a chalkboard. They're getting out doing it and they're learning their run area. So for me, as an engine officer, estimating stretches, positioning the rigs, those were always good drills. But the actual, hey, we're just going to go drill, it wasn't using other calls. It stayed very, very simple to the basics. Stretching hose and flowing water. That if I said, hey, I need a line here, it didn't matter what they had to do, they could get the line there. Whether it was a well hole stretch, a coupling drop, a rope stretch, just stretching a pre-connect, just a long stretch off a bulk bit, whatever I needed, they could do without me. They didn't need me over their shoulder because it's a stretch we don't do consistently to say, hey, this is how we do it. No, we've drilled on that enough that they're going to get the line in position. And then if you can flow water, if you can get in position, you're going to win. And that played out for us on a fire that had a rescue of the truck was down a man, just low staffing that day. And I had detail people and one fireman that was mine. And the truck boss was like, hey, help me locate it. Do you trust your guys to stretch off that standpipe? I know you only got one of them today. Yes, they got it. Cool. Help me get this door forced. Just help me locate it. Cool. And we were able to do it. Our staffing worked out that day. He needed some help to split up in that building or in that apartment. There was no doubt in my mind that line was going to be in position when I got back to that door because we've done it enough times. It didn't matter. There was detail people in there, whether their officers trained with them a lot on it. That guy from my company was going to make sure it was right because he was that comfortable with it that he could do his part, double check the other guys. And so to me in an engine, there's never been this idea of like advanced engine ops to train on. It was always the basics. And my drills stayed that way, stretching and then flowing water. When you were in the engine, I know your district and area is going to be obviously different than mine and most, but what were your go-to drills that a new officer could listen to right now and go, oh, I could do that. I could implement that tomorrow and really have an impact on my members.
So it's not necessarily engine or truck. It's firefighting as far as when I talk about the engine, because I really think the engine company is the backbone of the fire service. The stretch, like you said, the basics, the stretch. Should we be stretching in every run? Absolutely not, in my opinion. That's a hot topic. I've been debated with some guys I respect very well. In my world, it does not work. It does not work. In your world, I don't think it works either, because here's the deal. If you stretch to the wrong address and realize, oh, wait, that was the caller, it's on the street behind him, well, now you're completely out of position with hose in the street. So, that just opens you up for failure, is overcommitting. Again, discipline. I think you should be so good in an engine company because you've drilled so much leading up to that moment. You don't need to put hose in the street every run to quote unquote practice. You've already practiced for that moment. Professionalism comes from discipline and understanding when to commit in the moment. That's off topic. Going back to the drill though, this is what I like to do, even as a truck boss, is the basics, right? So if you're going, and the details within the basics, right? You're going for an EMS run. I'm going for a water leak, whatever it may be, engine or truck, it doesn't matter. But if you walk into a building, it's an old tenement, and it happens to have carpeted hallways, which you do see in some of these neighborhoods, which is, I can't imagine what's in that carpet. But like right there, it tells you that that's going to slow that line down. It's going to be a harder stretch. You walk in, tight stairs, small stairs, no well hole. That's going to tell you that the stretch will be delayed. Wrap around stairs, wrap around elevator shaft. Your stretch is going to be delayed. Maybe they're doing a bottle stretch. So engine or truck, it doesn't matter. It's the same conversation. It's about getting water on the fire. So I think about talking about the details of the stretch and some of the obstacles within it. So in the truck mindset, it's about tempo. It's timing. Where the engine, it's more of discipline and it's more of a cadence, right? But those details are all the same. So if you are on the top floor, have that conversation with your inside team. For me, it's the can and the ironsman. We have this discussion. Hey, bro, imagine we had a fire right here in this apartment and it's these two rooms on fire and we're losing it and we're starting to lose the apartment. And how long that stretch is, that's a 16-length stretch. Think about how long that takes to get water on the fire. Think about getting a second door, the closet door, putting in the position, using your can only when needed. Don't waste the can. So again, these are the details of professional firefighting. Same thing in the engine. Say, look at the stretch. Imagine we had the brothers searching ahead of the line. and we're delayed this far long, getting this line of position. How can we cut time off this stretch? Let's look at the well hole. The well is important. Let's do a bottle stretch maybe. Got that line of position a little bit quicker. So I think that if we maintain the standards of the basics of the stretch, talk about the details within that and what slows us down and how we can cut corners to get that stretch in position and water on the fire quickly.
And I think the other thing, and I think for some people it's just reality of just recognizing like every training doesn't need to be at a training academy and a training building and all this. The majority of my training is not done at our training academy, and it's only a few miles away from us. It's done in the streets we're going to make runs in, talking about buildings we're going to run in. I know the reality of your city. I mean, you have companies that it's going to take them forever just to get to the academy, that they're training in their area. You've sent me plenty of videos of them training right in your firehouse, and we do the same thing. But I also think there's a lot of value in training in your area. Don't get caught up in you need the training building and everything needs to be live fire. This and that. Training in your district provides a lot of, in my mind, what I just call comfort, because they've done it before. If you're going to go train on stretches, stretch to some buildings in your run area. Discuss how much hose they were going to need in that estimating the stretch process, and let them do it before. You pulled up to the fire now at 2:00 in the morning. They've already stretched to that building. They know what they're up against. They've walked through the building. They talked about it. To me, I've said it a bunch of times. We call it burning it down in conversation. We'll stop by it's called the Peanut Shop, little candy store, grab everyone something, a little snack to have, and just walk down the street and ask different people. All right, you got this storefront's in the middle of the row. What are we going to do? How much hose do we need? Which line are you pulling? If we have this condition, what are you doing? Okay, you were detailed to the truck. That became a big one the last time you were in Mobile doing a class and you did the little impromptu class at the firehouse. That was their go-to thing. Like, if I'm detailed to truck 4 and I get told to get on the roof of this commercial storefront, I'm cutting a hole in the rear. And they would go through why they were going to focus on the rear. And it was an impact you had, but it became part of that of, hey, you're detailed tomorrow. We're here next day. You're detailed to the truck. You get told to cut the hole. Where are you cutting it? How are we going to cut it? What cut are you going to do? And it would go into everything we were going to do. And it became preparing people for both sides, details to the engine or details off the engine to the truck as well as us. I think there's a lot of comfort in that. And when I say comfort, it lowers stress once you make a fire. It also gives, to me, the value of it gave. You were talking about buildings you're going to be first due. If the young guy made a mistake in what he said of what he thought the process would be, or how he would stretch the line, which line he would pull, how much hose we would need, it didn't need to be me stepping in. It gave an opportunity for the senior guys to step in and tell them, hey, brother, look, from my experience, I learned this, or this is a way I came up with to do it. I made a fire in a building very similar to this, and we did this. And it just brought up an opportunity for it to be very visual when the senior guys pass some information on, because you're talking about buildings you're driving past every day. They're in your first due. You may be first due here. And it gave those opportunities for senior members to pass on information while it's also visual to them. I try to get away from just the talking around the table all the time in a chalkboard and make it realistic by talking about specific buildings we've made fires in, or we've made fires in similar buildings, but you might be first due to a fire in that building today. So it's very visual and it's easier to remember, in my opinion. But what do you think the value is of doing that training throughout your first due district versus just focusing on a fire academy that it seems like a lot of people tend to do?
No, that's a great question, and a great point is that when you go to live fire training, there's value there. I look at a live fire training scenario as a scrimmage. That's not where you learn to play the game. You're not learning your plays at the scrimmage. You're running the plays at a scrimmage. Practice is where you're learning the plays. You have to practice your stretches so that when you go to the fire academy, you're playing to win. You're there to show off, to say, this is how good we are. We're going to beat you at your own game now. That's where we have to be. So it's important that we get our stretches down leading up to that. And I think that it's a big problem, because when you see some of the live fire training going on, they're pushing the limits. Really, really good fires in the quote unquote training fire, which is good. We need that. Not the time to be practicing your stretches, learning your stretch. We're running the stretch at that point. We're running the play. We're putting guys in a position. This is where we focus on the stress. This is where we get better at introducing as much real stress as we can to run the plays under the stress to see how we perform for the big game.
Yeah, and one of the last things I want to talk about before we get to what I want to close with is, and this was my experience, but to me it carried almost probably the most weight for an officer was the level of not just experience but expertise that they showed you. They were confident, not cocky, but you knew they legitimately were good at this job. It just showed through them. And their ability to command a company when you were inside and things were not going well was carried through that. It wasn't just like, oh, he's the great guy, because you've heard that before, like, oh, he's a great officer for taking care of his men. But when you would hit that wall, you're stretching down that hallway, you're crawling, and you're a newer guy, whatever it is, and you hit that wall and it's like, man, I'm really hot. And all it takes is that one guy, you hear his voice to be behind you and say, you're going to be fine. Keep going. And how much value that had. And you just have faith like, oh man, he's with me. And it was almost like when I was new and I had a guy that was like that. I mean, I worked for a guy, we thought he was probably the best fireman on earth. I mean, he just carried himself that way. We would go anywhere he said, no questions asked. We wouldn't think to second guess anything he said. If he said go, we went. And when he would get behind you and get over your shoulder and say, all right, keep going, you're going to be fine, we would go anywhere. And you truly, it gave you almost a sense of invincibility when he was with you, because you had that much confidence in not just his leadership, but his experience. And I think for me, at least, that's who I've tried to emulate. Is that luckily I've been around guys like that. They were all very experienced guys and they just handled themselves very well as leaders. But when they put it all together, it was those things like, I know not to raise my voice so I can use it as a tool later. That's experience based, but it's also, there's a lot of thought to that. There's a lot of intelligence to that they're controlling everything in their body to purposely stay calm because I might need to use this tool later. They understood their ability to just get behind somebody and go, I know we're hot, but we've got to make that room, and go, hey, and just know just their presence over your shoulder to say, hey, bud, you're going to be okay. Keep going. I've been here before. And we would go. And to me, that was the most valuable thing. All the other stuff you could throw out the window. I mean, it's great that they take care of people in the firehouse and all that. It's great they stand up for people when they get in trouble. But ultimately, we exist for one reason and one reason only, and that's to respond to calls. And so if they're ultimately good on the fireground, you're going to respect them in every way possible. But those true leaders I got to work for and had respect for, that's who they were. And that was what I always tried to emulate, was I got to work for guys like that just their presence made you feel comfortable no matter how bad it was. When I first became an officer, I worked for, like I said, the most senior member of our department. The two chiefs I got on every fire I went to were the two most senior members of our department. There was a lot of confidence just in the fact they were watching the building. They would let us push a lot of limits because that was their era of the fire department. But there was also, if they said get out, there was no debate. There was no, give me 30 more seconds, no, we had that much faith that if they said get out, we got to go. That we never questioned them. But we felt so much more confident in ourselves just having the presence of people there, whether it was captains I worked for that were on that line with you, or even chiefs that were just standing outside watching a building, made us confident pushing envelopes that, man, we're getting really hot. We're uncomfortable. Man, we got Albert Cross watching this fire. We're going to be fine. And I don't think that's something that can be taught. I mean, I think it helps teach it to you when you experience it. That's who you work for. But to me, that's a true fireground leader. Everything comes together for them. Their experience, their intelligence, everything comes together and they put it in one total package. And everyone around them not only performs better, but feels more confident simply because those people are there. You can't teach that. Like I said, for me, I got to work with experienced guys, so it came from that. I know just the conversations we've had, you've got to work with people like that before too. But I think that's the ultimate goal of any officer, whether it's engine, truck, whatever you're in, is your guys shouldn't feel more comfortable strictly because of your presence. You don't have to always be telling them what to do, how to do it. your presence should help them because it should bring confidence to them that they're going to be okay, that they can trust you and your decisions. Like I said, I know you've had those experiences too, because I know we've had these conversations about people you've got to work with before. But for me, because I want to close this on something I want you to touch on, that was going to be kind of my closing statement on it was that's my true image, the epitome of a fireground officer for me from my experiences were those guys who were able to put everything together from their experience, their knowledge, and their just control of their body and their emotions when they're in a fire building or watching it, that just their presence made guys feel better, made guys feel more confident.
So much value in everything you said. And I think what's important is that when we're on the fireground and outside of the kitchen, outside the firehouse, it's always professional. It's never personal. You can't let personalities get in the way of professionalism. For us, there's a chain of command, right? And the deputy, the battalion, the company officer, and the firefighter level. When all those align with true, real experience, you can't have anything but a positive experience at a fire. And that comes from the deputy trusting his battalion chief, more or less the incident commander of initial, when we pull up, he's the incident commander until a deputy comes and relieves him. If you have a good deputy that trusts his battalion, he allows him to work. He understands that's his building. Those are his men. He trusts them. And a good deputy will step back a lot of times. Now, if you run a good fire, both officers know that, and they trust your word with gold. Like you said, when it's time to go, it's time to go. There's no debate. And when you say, well, that chief runs a good fire, when he says it's time to go, I know it's time to get my guys and dial it back, find an area of refuge, or make our way out of this building because dominoes are falling the wrong way, and I just don't see it from the inside, but I trust his value from the outside. Engine and truck. Now, this is important that the two officers that work together have the ultimate trust with one another, that if you are going above, like we spoke about earlier, like you have to trust that officer to make the right decision, to understand that when he's realizing the dominoes are falling the wrong way and he's losing that apartment, to let the guy upstairs know, bro, we're losing it, dial it back. And if you're a good officer, understanding that, okay, I did this and this and this, but during those steps of getting to there, removing yourself from the stress, I got an off apartment for an area of refuge. I know where to bring my guys now. Those guys are trusting you to make that step, to make that decision, not to overlook it. So again, comes down to removing yourself from the stress value so you can perform under high stress. Like I talk about the Zen efficiency, right? Where you operate your optimum peak performance. We all have to be operating within that Zen efficiency. Now, breaking that down from officer to officer and that bond, that such incredible bond of trust, the firefighter level. That firefighter will go anywhere you tell him to go, as long as you are cool, calm, and collective. That comes from humility, is the forward progression of today's fire service. So if you, as a young firefighter, are not ready to go to war, because your officer wants to take you places that you've never been, but you have to be willing to go, he's going to bring you back, but you have to be ready to go. If you're not ready, tell your officer. For me, and you've probably heard me say this before, I give you 3 questions. Are you ready? Either yes or no. If you say yes, I'm going to say, are you sure you're ready? He's going to say, yes, let's go. There's no turning back. If you turn back at that point, you're turning yourself back to a different company because you weren't ready and you lied to me. You have to have humility. If things aren't right at that second question, are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready, boss. And you look down and his chin strap's twisted, his hood's pulled up over his face piece. I'm going to fix it for you in the moment. I'm going to break your balls in the kitchen, but I'm going to fix it for you in the moment. And then we're going to go to war. I'm going to take you to places you've never been, but I'm going to bring you back. So going back to the sequential order of the trust command staff level is that it starts ultimately with that young firefighter having humility. And then we work up from that, because you can have a great deputy, a great battalion, 2 great officers in the companies, great senior firefighters. But if one firefighter doesn't have the humility, that's the first domino to fall to jeopardize that chain of command. So I think it's important to have the humility, to have the experience. It all has to come together. But that's why, again, it comes down to, this is like beyond the fireground. It's important to go to the dinner dance, the company picnic, know everyone's kids, go to the Christmas party, turn out, do the right thing. As you take care of the job takes care of you on a professional level, the fireground, and a personal level. Something was ever to go wrong, your kid gets sick, you have a fire in your home, the brothers step up because you did the right thing. The fireground, the kitchen table, in life, It all comes from loyalty and trust. And that's the fire service to me. And I think that we're getting swayed from this, from whatever reason, from outside pushing in, from false sense of security through social media, egos. We're destroying the greatest job in the world because we're not trusting one another. We're not having humility, and we're not loyal to one another. We're in trouble. Fire service is better than it's ever been. I believe that. But we have to maintain it, because I don't want to go the other way, because a lot of guys worked really, really hard to make this quote unquote blue collar profession a true profession. And I'm not a big fan of the word blue collar, because we are all professionals that worked very, very hard to be where we are today. And the brothers that we looked up to, which we can go down a list of many names, worked really, really hard to bring us to where we are today in the greatest job in the world, the American Fire Service.
All right. So before we get into the kind of how I want you to close it out, I want to touch on it because I want you to close it out with your experience between the two, the differences with the engine and the truck, being a boss. And I want to lead into that with, we've talked about this many, many times. Classes we do, I think we've talked about it on podcast before, but the value of making the radio transmission, we have water on the fire, not waiting till you've put it out. For me, it's always just been a thing. And it was like just truck bosses saying, hey, I want to know when you're there. I have all the faith in the world. When you guys get there, you won't, it's getting better. You're not going to not put it out once you get there. Let me know once you've got water on the fire. We've talked about this, that very important transmission should also only come from one person. And that would be the engine boss, not people calling and someone answering for them. But to me, it wasn't always about the chief knowing, hey, it's about to get better. That was a benefit. It was about telling those people that went past me or went above me, I've got you. We're there. Things are about to get better for you. You're in a worse place than I am, but it's about to get better. My perspective on that has always been in the engine was, hey, I'm just trying to do you a favor and let you know I'm here. Things should get better very, very quickly for you. Obviously, your perspective on that, being so much time in a truck, is going to be the other side of it. What can you add to that? The importance of guys, especially newer officers, understanding the value and the importance of giving that radio transmission of, we've got water on the fire, and not just waiting until they've actually put it completely out.
Well, the truck officer operates through chaos, timing, and feel, more or less, more of an instinctual notion, where the engine officer, it's direction, discipline, and water on the fire, like you said. Now, time is a tool in everything we do, and if we can manipulate and maneuver time, we can use it for our benefit. But to understand time, we have to remove ourselves from stress. So as a company officer in a truck company, you should be listening to many things, right? Water on the fire is the key transmission we're waiting for. However, everything leading up to that, burst length, frozen hydrant, whatever it may be, we're losing water. You have to be thinking 10 steps ahead. You should already know your second means of egress and letting your brothers know where they are. Guys, I got a fire escape here. I got a portable ladder here. If there's no portable ladder, put your head out the window and say, bro, get me a ladder over here, because we should always be searching to our next point of egress. This is more of a floor above type scenario. The fire floor, we're searching for that fire. When we find the fire, we're directing the engine into place and we're going about our business. And then we're searching for life in more a detailed element. Yes, we never dismiss life while we're looking for that fire. But during that transition, and this is a very important transition, is that exchange between, I have the fire, engine, it's down the hall on the left. Now, as you're coming, there's an exchange right then that we've talked about before, that it's an intimate moment with the engine officer and the truck officer. It's a conversation of a few words, but it's a very important few words. That's important. We have that as an officer as well, whether it's truck or engine, but having that dialogue of understanding the fire's here, we got control of, let's get the line in position. These are all transmissions that are never transmitted. It's a conversation. So operating from engine to truck, I think it's important too, as a young officer, to understand we are going to have these conversations with one another. And it is a give and take. And when it comes down to it, it's, kindness goes a long way on the fireground as well, especially in the fire floor. Tight hallway. Don't come down asses and elbows fighting for that fire. You just be a gentleman, step over to the side, let the engine get into place. Those are all the details within the fire apartment or fire room that no one even really speaks of. So just wrapping up for your question, the difference or what you should be thinking of a truck officer is timing. Time is a tool. When you don't hear water is on a fire, you should have an internal clock that's ticking at all times, because every fire has a different tempo, and that internal clock ticks to that tempo. You should be expecting to hear water on the fire within a certain amount of time. If you don't hear it, something's wrong. That said, the chief on the outside should be having that same internal clock. That's why it's important to have that integrity of talent and experience from the deputy all the way down. We can't prompt that. Sometimes on the command staff level, we're prompting our company officers to give reports. We're rushing them into a report when they're not ready to give it because they haven't put the puzzle together. They're still piecing it together very quickly, but give them a moment to do it. So from the outside looking in, yes, you're seeing it different, but you are the eyes and the ears for the chief. He's waiting to hear what you have to say. If that officer on the inside has not put it all together, he has not solved the problem he's about to tell you or how he's going to solve the problem, give him a second. He'll get back to you. Don't prompt another officer to say, hey, how the engine making out? Do they have water on the fire yet? Because he might hear that line flowing and operating, but they haven't made the turn to the fire room and say, yeah, chief, they got water on the fire. Then they take every window in the building and the place goes off like a Roman candle. Acids and elbows, we have fire everywhere. So it's very, very important that we have that distinction of who we're communicating with, the IC to the engine officer. No one else. Nobody else at all, because there's too much area for a mistake or a gray area to get the wrong information, and that'll start things going the wrong way very quickly.
All right, now I want to close it out with your perspective, because you do have different perspective than I do. My perspective as an officer is 100% been in the engine, like I said, outside of details or time swaps or some overtime here and there. You spent some time in the engine as an officer and plenty of time in the truck now as well. And I think what you can offer people is truly putting it in perspective for them, the difference between the two mentally. Obviously, it's a different pace. One of them, it's a 100% team effort in the engine. You're all together for the most part. Guys might be further down the line or whatever, but you're all towards one specific task of getting that line in place. Where in the truck, you have guys going kind of everywhere, and the officer's not necessarily right with them. And I think that's really important. Again, my focus is on, I promoted early, and now we're making less fires now than we were then. So for an inexperienced guy that gets put in those positions, maybe all of his experience was in the truck, now he's going to the engine. Maybe all of his experience was in the engine, now he's going to the truck. And being able to understand, like you said, where he fits in now that he's an officer with the engine versus the truck.
Well, I think the main thing with the engine is that word company integrity. We have company integrity in both engine and truck, obviously, but the company integrity standpoint from an engine company is, I think, is very different, where I'm going to make sure that you are squared away. Your hood is on right. Your chin strap is squared away. And I don't want to get into the debate of wearing chin straps and not chin straps. When you work at my company, the helmets we are issued are like having a salad bowl on your head. So you wear a chin strap or it's going to fall off. It's bottom line. Could the helmets be designed much better? Yeah, they could be, but they're not. It's what we're dealt with. That's a whole different debate I don't want to get into. So yeah, with me, you wear your chin strap. Ready to go to war. Because the nozzle man, the backup man, and even the control guy, we have to be able to go places that no one else can go. The truck can kind of dance their way into position, do you wear your hood in the truck? Yes or no? I mean, that's a whole debate. I think most guys are today. You'd be foolish not to, in my opinion, but that's a whole different conversation. But engine company is safety's number one. And when I say safety, I'm not saying safety overreach. What I'm talking about is putting your gear on the right way, all of it, because fires are burning really, really hot today. And with lithium-ion batteries involved now, these fires are burning temperatures you can't even wrap your brain around, to be honest with you. So when we're crawling down that hallway, we have to be ready to go to war. So engine company integrity, and safety. When I say safety, it's making sure our men are ready to go to war, because I'm going to bring you places you've never been. And we have guys going into places positionally oriented that we have to protect. The interior stairs, the brothers going above, people coming down. It's a whole thing, but it comes from discipline. Truck officer, a little different. There's discipline, but it's discipline within trusting your men. It's almost like the engine just and this isn't beating up on the engine, because that's not what I'm saying, but picture you have a bunch of toddlers you have to kind of supervise somewhat. They're at that point of their life where they can kind of do things on their own, but you kind of have to watch them, because you're ultimately the one responsible for water on the fire, that transmission. The truck, it's like having teenagers where they kind of do their own thing. You trust them, but you always got to have to keep somewhat of an eye on them. That's how the truck is. So it's more individual, where we are focusing on individual tasks that ultimately piece together, we get the job done. That's why position-based firefighting is so important. And even in the smaller departments that don't have, quote unquote, 6 guys or a position-based understanding, it's pivoting in the moment that everyone has a job to do. When it all comes together as a truck officer, it's very easy. But the truck officer's number one job, first due truck officer, is to find the seat of the fire. Then I talk to you, the first due engine officer, and say, Anthony, it's down the hall. 2 doors on the left. My cam man's got control of it. Easy stretch. Boom. And you come down the hallway. Beautiful. That's that conversation, that intimate moment that we have, you and I, as 2 officers in the moment, stress removing ourselves and talking, just having a conversation like a gentleman. So the difference is, just to wrapping up what you're saying, is that the truck is more to be danced our way into position. It's more of a rhythm per se, where the engine company is more of a cadence. I always say the engine company is the infantry of the fire service, always progressively moving forward. It's important we have that integrity. It's important we have that cadence, but then together we bring it all together, and there's a beautiful rhythm about every fire we go to, where, that poetry in motion feeling, right? And the symphony, the guy directing it, the director of a symphony, like, he's not saying much. He's just kind of glancing and pointing and looking, and things are happening. That's professional firefighting. That's where we have to be. So engine and truck, there's a difference. You'll find it by making mistakes, but just know that mistakes made in the engine, firemen die. Mistakes made in the truck, we can get pretty banged up. We can get in trouble, but most times we can recover in the moment. Engine firemen kind of get the raw end of the deal a lot of time because it gets overlooked. At least in my department, a lot of guys, it's a truck-based department. And I think most major cities are a truck-based department. Never dismiss the engine. Some of the greatest firefighters ever to walk this earth are just enginemen. When I say just enginemen, just dudes that crawl down hallways. Don't dismiss that. Don't ever disrespect an engine firefighter, because they're the ones really going to war. The truck kind of dances around, has a good time, But metal day, not too many engine guys go to metal day. They go to the burn center.
All right. Now, I want to end it with that. That was how I wanted to end it, because you do have that perspective of both sides. And I know where you worked, it was a lot of experience on both sides. But as we close it out, again, Mickey, as always, appreciate your time, you doing this, coming on this podcast. If people want to reach out to you, learn more from you, take a class, let them know how they could get in touch with you, or where you'll be in the near future that they might be able to attend a class.
When's this coming out?
Saturday. Yep.
Saturday. So Saturday, I will be, if you're listening to this right now, you might be at the Providence Safety Survival Conference doing the keynote there. I'm doing the breakout session in the afternoon. After that, I'm in Florida, Tampa Bay area with yourself and Mike Ciampo. We're doing a 3-person class there. I'm doing my battery class. If you want to reach out for any reason at all, you can try DMing me on Instagram. However, I went through some DMs this morning and realized they're from 2023 that I haven't even seen. So a lot of it gets put into some spam folders that, for whatever reason, they hide them for you for a couple of years, and they come up into your feed. I just saw them this morning. So the best way is to email me at topfloortactics@gmail.com if you want to put anything together, any questions. Thanks for the support with everything with the podcast. And podcast is on a new platform. You can find it on all the major channels. View from the Top Floor with Mickey Farrell. It's a weekly show. It might be more here and there if I find some time. Try to get more content as much as possible, but I do appreciate all the support with that. So again, Anthony, thanks for having me on Fire Engineering, for the opportunity to come on and talk.
No, I appreciate your time, Mickey.
Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. Fire facilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.